This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
So we're going to go ahead and get started. Does that work for you, Katya?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right. So this is Katya Shapiro. She is with the library, and she is here tonight to talk to you about the library, services of the library. In many ways, I think the relationship with the library and the city, between the library and the city, I think that's really a unique kind of situation, and I think people might have questions of why isn't it part of the city? What does a public-private kind of partnership look like? And so Katya's going to talk to us about that. And there'll be time for some questions, and then we'll go from there. All right, so Katya, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can.
Great. So can everybody hear me clearly? Okay, great. I have a little bit of a funky sound from you guys, so I may have to ask you to repeat a question or something, but I'm Katya, as Connie said. I am the director of the Easthampton Public Library, which we call the Easthampton Public Library, despite the fact that it is not a municipal department. Our situation is not that unusual in Massachusetts or in the country. A lot of libraries are sort of semi-nonprofits or nonprofits that contract for work with the city or state. Some libraries are city departments. There's just a really wide range across the state. I can share later, if you want, a document that I have that kind of breaks down how many libraries in the state are municipal departments versus associations. And within that, there's also a pretty wide range of relationships. There are some libraries that are technically nonprofits, but are almost completely aligned with the city or the city that they are in. Their workers are municipal workers. There's just every arrangement you can imagine. The arrangement in Easthampton has honestly been fairly informal. There's been a contract for services, kind of like a memorandum of understanding that basically just says, hey, we'll do these things and provide library services, and the city will fund the library at an agreed amount, and that agreed amount is voted on every year by city council. So right now it's in its special limbo where the mayor has included it in her budget and council has to approve it. But we don't do quite as detailed a budget accounting as some other departments do, because there are large parts of our budget that are unrelated to the city. And how we do this is we have an endowment. And so that endowment, which, fluctuates with the rest of the market, so we'll see how it does, but has allowed us to operate semi-independently for quite a long time. So we don't have elected trustees. We are able to operate as a nonprofit, but over 50% of our budget comes from the city. And that's more recent. We've been, over the last few years, the council and the mayor have been increasing our funding amount to bring us more in line with other municipalities in the state. And hopefully that will continue. And with that increase in funding, we're also really trying to have an increase in communication and collaboration and, to behave as much like a city department as we can while taking advantage of our nonprofit status. So one of the things that I really want to do as director of the library is make sure that there's a lot better communication than there has been in the past between the library and city administrators, elected officials, committees, just, to make sure that the library is treated as a functioning resource and we all have the same kind of reciprocal care for each other. So that's probably the best way I can put it. That's our budget, but in terms of what we actually do, we function as the city's public library. We're a member of the statewide consortium for public libraries. We receive state funding for public libraries. We offer library membership cards to everyone in the city. Right now, about half of the city's population actually has a library card. So we're aiming to increase that number. We'd love full participation. And one of the reasons we'd love that is because not only would that mean everyone in the city is actually participating and using their library, which is amazing, it helps us understand that we are being the fullest resource we can to the city. However, there are people who use the library in all kinds of ways who don't have a card as well. And how many of you guys, just out of curiosity, are library card holders? I won't judge you at all. I'm just totally curious. Cool. If there is anybody who is not raising a hand, Omar, are you seriously not a library card holder?
No, I'm not saying that, you know.
Okay.
And mine may have expired because I got it before the
No
map change.
worries. You know, like I said, I don't judge, but I encourage anybody who doesn't have a library card to come down and get one because it can open quite a few resources. Because we're part of a consortium that covers half the state and we have reciprocity with some of the other library groups across the state, we have just a really wide range of services that are more than what is in the building. So you can use the stuff in the building whether you're a card holder or not, but you can take things home from the building. You can use ebooks and audiobooks. You have access to significantly more research resources. Having a card really opens up a lot more options for library use. As you may have noticed, we also now have 2 buildings. We're in the middle of a sort of a capital moment. We've had that building since 1881, the building we're currently in. It was built to be the library and has been the library of Easthampton pretty much continuously since then. However, it is not super ADA compliant and a kind of a difficult old building to maintain and has no meeting and gathering space, all of which are sort of important things, and also no parking, all of which are very important things for a modern library to have. And so we've been looking around for a few years since before I started here to find a new space that might work for the library. And we've looked at a lot of different options. And we sort of came into a windfall, which is that Easthampton Savings Bank said they would give us a building. And, you don't look a gift building in the mouth. And so what we've done to try to start using it, right now they've offered it to us kind of as a lease to own. They are planning to give it to us. Currently, we have basically a free lease on the building. So they retain ownership, but as soon as we are able to, we are basically able to take it over. And that is the intention that is stated and written in our agreement. And so with that understanding, we have just done our first renovation on the building, which, while it doesn't make the building ready to become the new library, it makes it a space we can use for programming and that we can offer to the community as a meeting space, and basically really increases our ability to serve the community. So we're really excited about the library annex, and I know some of you will probably have questions about its use going forward. We are not moving there anytime soon. This is phase 1, so everything stays at the library, and we add more stuff at the annex. Basically, the only thing that's going to move over to the annex is our historical collection, and we'll be able to talk about having more resources there and kind of taking up some of the slack that the Historical Society is currently slacking. The Historical Society is not super active right now, so more people have been turning to us for our resources. So we're hoping to increase those resources. That is me talking really fast. We do all kinds of programming. We really would love to see some of you guys. If you'd like to see the annex, we'd love to see you at our community potluck on Wednesday night. You can find all the information about that on our website. But I can talk about libraries till the world ends, and libraries are kind of a hot button right now. The latest executive order is about how we get to lose the federal library funding, which does impact statewide library funding as well, and a lot of special programs, including things like the Commonwealth Catalog and half the staff for the Mass Board of Library Commissioners and many other things. We'll see. It's, lawsuit number 40,000. So, we'll see if that stands. But libraries are in a kind of an embattled place right now, but we're also a really strong community resource, and we intend to continue being so. So we have no plans to not offer the services that we're offering right now, and we'll find a way to do it. So I want to open the floor for questions because, again, I could talk about libraries till the world ends, but what I really think is that it would be more interesting if you ask the questions you actually have. I see a hand raised.
Sure. 2 questions. Maybe we could say our name.
My name's Joe Landers. I've been
Hello.
in town since 96 or 98, somewhere around there. I actually currently do the books for Forbes. Um, who's also in a state of growth and change right now with their performance stage.
I know, it's so exciting. Forbes is getting a giant outdoor stage, guys.
Mix of ARPA money and restricted contributions from the community is mostly what's funding that. With the new building, well, two questions. One is, when I originally joined the library, it wasn't part of CW Mars, which really limited how useful it was. So kudos for becoming part of the CW Mars system. I don't remember what year that happened in. But I was wondering, is the building that Easthampton Savings is donating, is that actually going to the library or is it going to the city? And who is going to be responsible for the maintenance? And does it have a big deferred maintenance liability attached to it right now, because it did sit empty for several years?
Like our current building, it is going directly to the library. We also own the current building, and we will be seeking, as you brilliant municipal thinkers start contributing to the community, we are going to be seeking really good ideas for what to do with that building. So keep thinking about that. But yes, the ESB's plan is to give the building directly to the Library Association. And currently ESB retains ownership, so they have some of the liability, but it is insured in our name at this point, and we hold the liability.
I meant the deferred maintenance liability. The building gets it empty for a long time.
That's on us. I mean, basically the whole plan is that we're going to gut renovate the thing.
What will be the source of funding?
Great question. We're basically, the current funding, the current construction was financed largely by a loan from Bank ESB, and we are working with various partners to raise capital funds to offset that loan, but we also are going to pay some of it from our endowment. We came in under budget. I just learned that today, so I'm very excited. It was about a $600,000 project, and we were under budget on it, so cheers. Very excited. But in terms of the operations and the capital funding going forward, you're going to see us start a big capital funding push in the business and grant community to try to figure that out. We did apply for a state building grant, which tends to pay about 40% of allowable costs. We did not get that grant in this cycle. It was a very competitive cycle, and only about 2 municipalities in the area received it. One of which was Montague. Yay, Montague, headed by another Easthampton resident. But we are eligible to try for that kind of funding again in 2 years if it is still in existence, which, in that it is state funded, it might be. But there are pros and cons to receiving that funding. Doing the project kind of on our own, or even possibly doing a bond issue, offers us the possibility of kind of doing it in a phased way that will make it not just like an incredibly expensive project all at once. So we kind of gives us more options. Our current plan is a 3-phaser. It's the first phase we just completed, second phase that would allow us to move into the building, and then a third phase that would allow us to expand that building while we're in it. But again, these are in the early planning stages. I see you in the back there. I'm not going to say the person in green because everyone's in green.
I am Nathan Markey.
Hi, Nathan.
I have 2 questions that are unrelated. You mentioned that libraries have become a political issue, and back when, I know libraries, I believe, I don't know my history that well, but I believe they were started by rich people, and as their way of giving back to the community. And back when rich people did that, built hospitals, libraries, et cetera, instead of vanity projects. I want to know, in what way as citizens can we help you in this battle, per se, going forward?
Well, there are a few things I would say. The first and most important way I think you can help your library be a thriving public institution is to participate in it. That's why I was really encouraging people to get cards, encouraging people to attend our programming, encouraging people to suggest programming to us, suggest resources to us, to use your library is probably and to be really familiar with the offerings that we have and let other people know about them is probably the strongest thing that anyone can do for their library. Other things people can do, we have recently had a push to get people to be on our board. We are always looking for new board members. We may have a full slate for the spring, but one of the ways that we bring people on in our governance is by bringing people onto our committees, which include things like governance and finance and all the steering committees that help us do the work that we do. And you don't have to be on the board. You can be a private citizen, you can be just a citizen helper on a committee. So there are tons of ways you can help that way. The other way, honestly, is for advocating for municipal funding. That's a huge, and state funding, anytime that there's a call for support for your library to speak out about what your library has done for you, what your library has, there's a lot of meanings of embattled. Some people are concerned about the content of libraries. Some people are frustrated about libraries existing at all because they're public spaces. Some people like to give lip service to libraries, but don't actually like what we do. Some people, and you mentioned sort of the Gilded Age version of libraries is, Andrew Carnegie famously built quite a few of them, one of which needs a new roof in Montague. But one of the reasons he did that was so that there would be less public funding for public schools. So, it's a mixed bag. But I think the truth of the matter is that in order of helpfulness, use your library, advocate for your library, and be prepared to stand up for your library if anyone feels that it should not exist or should not operate as a free and equitable public service.
My other unrelated question is, what is your, I like to listen to audiobooks usually. What does your audiobook collection look like?
Honestly, it's quite nice right now because one of the things, Joe mentioned the consortium, one of the things that's great about us being part of CWMARS is that we effectively operate as a branch library of a pretty large system. And so we use an app called Libby, which is done by the service Overdrive. That's one of the more popular library audiobook services. And we have a pretty wide collection in CWMARS. We can also take suggestions. We buy system-wide, so my staff doesn't buy the audiobooks, but we can pass suggestions on to the CWMARS staff, or you can do it even in the app. The other nice thing is that we have a reciprocal arrangement with every other library consortium in the state. So what you can do, and I can show you how to do this basically, is you open up Libby, you sign in as a CWMARS member, and then you say, hey, look, I'd also like to be part of the Cape Cod system. I'd also like to be part of the North of Boston system. I'd also like to be part of basically every system in the state. And your CWMARS card allows you to do that. So for instance, my son is really into the Mr. Men books. And we don't have those audiobooks, which are read by Jim Dale of Harry Potter fame, for those of you who like certain audiobooks. But the Minuteman Consortium all the way across the state does, and I get them all the time. We also, any resident of Massachusetts can have a Boston Public Library e-card, which also gets you access to the Boston Public Library. So pretty much within the whole state, we have quite a robust collection. And we're always, I will say this is a library economics problem that is kind of beyond municipal governance stuff, but library ebooks and ebook licensing for libraries are a huge problem that has not been solved by the publishing industry right now. They're very expensive, they expire, they're not super easy to acquire. There's not a great model for it right now. And so sometimes you may wonder why there's such a long wait or why we don't buy more copies or why things disappear from our system. It has a lot to do with the publishing economics of ebook fund and audiobook funding. And if anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to send you 40 links about it, but that's its own separate problem. But I think our collection is pretty robust and I get a ton of use out of it. And for those of you who have been saying use your library, you don't have to enter your library to use it. You can set up a card and download absolutely everything you want. We have a free video streaming service called Canopy also. So there are plenty of people who I consider heavy library users who I never see because they use books, audiobooks, and streaming video.
So hi, Katya. One thing I wanted to mention as a parent is that some of the most cost savings I had entertaining my kids was with the free museum passes at the library.
Thank you.
And then my kids all learned, like, they all went with their classes across the street to the library to get their library cards, and they would go there every week to check out books. And I'm just wondering, how has that changed with the schools up at Whitebrook?
It has changed significantly. We have a really different interaction with the schools. We still are able to engage pretty heavily with the school librarians and with the school administrators and to be part of any school event. We're also working with Jean Libby, the family coordinator, to make sure that incoming kindergartners are all getting library cards this year, which is something that Northampton has been doing for several years, and we would like to copy their model because it's working out very well. And that way it's an opt-out rather than an opt-in situation. Because you get a ton of paperwork when you come into kindergarten, and I think for some people it's just overwhelming, so that we're just going to do it as part of the paperwork packet, and I think it's going to work really well. I've done that before in other school environments, and it should be really good. But in terms of actual visiting, it's a little harder. One of the things I had talked to Acting Superintendent Minenda about was getting one of the buses to stop directly in front of the library after the school. And that's something that we didn't manage to set up this year, but I'm hoping to set up for next year so that we have an easy way for kids to get to us at least a couple days a week.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Carry on. Yes, Connie.
Yeah, I think one of the really great things about the library is, in many ways, there's just been a lot of attacks on marginalized communities. And can you just talk a little bit about the role that public libraries and in particular Easthampton has played in trying to just address the diversity and perspective about beliefs about, whatever, and how you might participate in both being a place for people to come together, but also a place for people to try to gain some education or whatnot for perspective.
Yeah, a couple of things about this. I would not say all libraries or librarians are particularly radical, but by the nature of a library, by being a free and low barrier to entry space, by being a space people are allowed to come into without having to bring anything, any money, any particular status, any particular membership or citizenship or anything like that, that existence is, to my mind, kind of a radical thing. Like simply having an open door and, in some ways asking no questions is a pretty radical thing, that kind of being a third space. We also, because we're a small library, we have a pretty highly curated collection. We buy with care and with a lot of thought. And what we buy, we do our best to reflect a really wide and thoughtful range of human perspectives. And that goes from our picture books right through to our adult nonfiction. We're really trying to buy and highlight and make available, not just available, but accessible, a really wide range of materials in our collection, and a really intelligent and thoughtfully curated range, because frankly, we're simply not going to buy everything. We are making decisions every day, and every decision we make is not a neutral decision. It's a decision with thought. So I can't claim that curating a collection, people have this fantasy about libraries operating in a perfectly neutral space, but sort of by our nature, that's not possible. We make choices. And we want the choices we make to be as thoughtful and thought-provoking and widely representative as possible. I come from a children's librarian background, so that's, the way that I think about things. I think one of the well-known figures in children's literature likes to talk about this concept of mirrors and windows when you're seeing, and I think about that in collection development altogether. So people need to be able to see themselves in books, and they need to be able to see into other worlds through books. And that includes seeing stories about all kinds of people. It includes seeing stories that resonate personally and stories that I'm seeing people who are utterly unlike you being the heroine of a story. So our collection is another way. Also, our programming. We really want our programming, one of the things that we've been really hating is that we're in this building where our programming isn't fully accessible, and there are a lot of people who can't come for various reasons to the programming we offer. So one of the ways that we are really hoping to break down some barriers to entry and make it more possible for people to use our space is by having this new space. Yes, Joe.
Speaking more along this line too, Forbes is seeing an increasing need in programming that addresses low income and people who don't have access to computers and things like that. They've actually built a new space in the reference room that's somewhat private, so that if someone needs to be on the phone and on a computer at the same time, that they've got a little bit of privacy. And they developed it with eyesight to the reference desk so that the reference librarian would be aware if someone needed help there. How much of a need are you seeing that in Easthampton? Again, given the limitations of the space, I imagine you may see quite an expansion once you're in the new annex.
I'm seeing quite a large need, and it's not a need we're always able to fulfill. People needing, I think, the things that people need for free are not just resources, but space in a very real way. And as you said, workspace, especially given like sort of gig economy, people.
Well, even things like health insurance applications.
People need to have healthcare visits. People need to have interviews a lot of the time. Often I see lawyers or social workers who need to meet with clients in a private space. So all of these things are things that we are trying to make space available for, and we're not able to, at the moment, accommodate every need of that kind, but we certainly do the best we can. We also, things that you might not think of, like family visitation happens in the library quite a lot, supervised family visitation, things that just, there needs to be open public space where people can gather for almost any number of reasons, and sometimes privately, sometimes publicly, but just the need for space is sort of unrelenting. And that's one of the reasons that our current building hasn't fully served us, because space is one of the things that libraries offer very much in the 21st century. Space, Wi-Fi, call it what you will.
What do you think will happen with the old building?
I genuinely don't know the answer. I keep joking that I can only sort of focus on one project at one time, but the truth is I really care about that old building and I love it, and I want it to remain a public space in Easthampton. And I don't know the answer to how that's going to work, but that's a huge part of our planning process. It's not the afterthought of our planning process. Let's put it that way. But I genuinely don't know what's going to happen.
Other questions?
Yes, who is that?
Jan Zach.
Oh, hi.
Just a quick question around the nature of people who are actively using the materials. Are you seeing demand for materials in languages besides English here in Easthampton?
I am seeing some. I'm not seeing a huge amount, but I think part of that, this might be one of those if you build it, they will come kind of situations. I think the more collections we have available, and as a small, as I said, as a small curated collection, we try to focus on like specific avenues, like where our video games are really good, or our graphic novels, or we don't try to buy everything in every direction. But I think if we had a stronger collection of any particular language materials, they'd get used. A lot of the times the people asking me for materials in languages other than English are not speakers of those languages, but they're people learning those languages or teaching those who are speakers of other languages. And in Easthampton, that's partly an access thing too, that's just there aren't as many people with like transportation who are able to access the library, who might be language insecure also, I guess is the way to put it. But I do think there's room in our collections for some expansion.
Questions?
Oh, Felicia, one thing, sorry, and then I'll follow up. One of the things that we had done last year was created kind of like an English conversation circle and trying to make some openings for folks who were trying to learn English or trying to learn more advanced English, like business or job English. And we're going to be doing that again this summer. And some of that turned into some private tutoring too, which might be something we continue to offer. So that might also bring in more people who are using multilingual materials.
Thanks. If people wanted to volunteer for that, how would they do that?
Call me.
Jake, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. My name's Jake. I was curious, when we had another session a few weeks back with the community center, the senior center, makes me think of what type of partnerships you have with other, you know, municipal organizations here. Like they were mentioning a lot that they don't have space for a lot of the programs that they want. This building opens up the potential for partnerships. Is that something that you see in the future there or with other?
Unquestionably. I think one of the things that this space offers to us is in some ways a reciprocity. You know, the schools have offered us space. The Council on Aging has offered us space. We already do a book club over there. You know, we partner, probably the city department that we partner with the most closely is the Council on Aging. And we definitely have a lot of reciprocity and we talk a lot, but we are in talks about what they might be able to use the new building for and how. And we have a very overlapping mission. It's not the same, but we definitely serve a lot of the same population in different ways. And we try to make sure that we're enhancing each other's efforts rather than duplicating. I also think, you know, we've talked a lot about supporting one of the things, we're part of the city's digital equity commission that's working on the digital equity grant. And so we've mostly offered advice and flyering at this point, but now we actually have a space we can hold some classes in and we can sort of be more part of that effort. We also, you know, I've been thinking of this space also as an available space for things like the Envision Main Street project, you know, like all these visioning sessions that we've had. This is a perfect space for that. It's like a big empty corporate room, basically. And, you know, so there are a lot of city events and ideas that I think we will wind up hosting. And we're also working with our other cultural organizations in that part of town to try to figure out what goes best where, you know, working with city arts and working with, you know, trying to just say like, okay, when someone comes to us, where do we send them? You know, like, which is the right fit for each of these endeavors. But yeah, I'm expecting that the more we can sort of get the flow going and get this thing funded. I mean, our biggest issue right now is just funding the staffing for it. So that's, you know, that's the biggest cost of anyone using the building is the staffing, because the, you know, the HVAC is kind of on anyway. But, so that'll be the thing we figure out going forward. But yeah, I expect, I mean, I'd love to see as much usage as possible. It's just going to be a measure of kind of slowly bringing it up to speed. Yes.
You mentioned the Historical Society, which the last time I checked was only open between 4 and 8 hours a week to the public, making it kind of unusable. And I think that it is probably almost entirely volunteer led and funded.
Yes.
And that's probably why it's open such limited hours. Were you thinking of having them relocate part of their collection to your space?
That is not my decision. I think what is happening with the Historical Society, as I understand it, and again, I moved to town 3 years ago, there's a lot going on. My understanding is simply that they're kind of in a low point of the volunteer cycle. Essentially, like there was a robust group of people working with it a while back, and some of those people have moved on or, you know.
Could also be an aging thing. I know that was a big concern for Hilltown Land Trust at one point before they merged with the trustees.
Yeah, so I think
their entire organization would disappear because everybody got too old and died, basically.
That may in fact be what's happening. But again, I just am not deeply involved in what's going on there. I think what we're trying to do, and we have partnered in the past with the Historical Society, that's definitely in the institutional memory of the folks that I'm working with. What we're doing right now, we have a certain number of historical collections on our own. And we've been working a little bit with city archives too. Like they've sent folks to us to look up stuff like property rights stuff. And that's been something we've been able to help with. I have someone on staff now who devotes about 10 hours a week to the historical collections. And that's a huge upgrade from what I had. So having one knowledgeable person who knows a little bit about things, huge upgrade. And I want to keep upgrading that. I'd like to work with the Historical Society, but right now, as you mentioned, there just is not a lot of personnel to work with. So what we're focusing on is making our collections as accessible and as useful as possible.
Mhm.
I think there's a future there. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to shape out.
Other questions? Other questions? I think one last question. I know you alluded to, I know you've mentioned a few of these, but I just want to kind of highlight, or what are the ways that residents can support the library? I mean, I know you talked about there's obviously the board, which is full right now, but what are the other ways that if people were like, hey, I want to support the library, what are the most kind of accessible ways that they could support the library?
Well, someone mentioned volunteering to offer a course or something. We're always up for that. We love to do that. That's one of my favorite kinds of volunteers, when they come in and they say, I do this thing. Can I do it for you on Wednesday night next month? And we say, yes, oh my God, please. So that actually is one of my favorite kinds of volunteering, because that means I don't have to find work for you to do. I have to use the great skills you already have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that. I think the other thing is just the advocacy is really huge. I said something about, speaking to your elected officials and speaking for our budget and stuff, and that is big. But honestly, if you're on any kind of social media, follow us, share our programs, get people in.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want. We want to be used. And so I also think there is, I think the other reason I want people to come in and use the library is because I want people to have a realistic understanding of what we really are and really do. I think a lot of people, I'm sorry, my child is calling me, so I'm going to wrap this up. But what I really think is I want people to understand what we are and what we do. I'm coming, love, and support us.
Yep.
Okay, excuse me one moment.
Yep.
Yes, I can, kiddo.
Mhm.
Sorry.
You're good. Any other questions that we might have for her when she comes back? I think so once she comes back, we'll let her finish, and then we'll answer questions that you all might have about running for city council or getting on boards or anything like that. Oh, bye.
That was Leo. Hi. You sign me out? Okay. Okay, did you say hi? All right, yeah, that's Leo. Hi, any other questions I can answer for y'all? Sorry, I had a very important touch to wipe.
Yeah, no, I think that was everything. Thank you so much, Katya. We really appreciate
Thank you, guys. And thank you so much for participating in this. This is really major, and for setting this up, guys. Thank you very much. And please, come by the library, introduce yourselves. Your faces are all a little blurry, so I'd love to see you in person.
Great. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Katya.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.